Well, hello everybody. How you doing? Well, I've finally given in. I'm jumping in the fray, so to speak. I'm joining the crowd. I'm following the crowd, whatever you want to call it. Um, Beetle Brad started a great thread a couple of days ago about the first CD you ever bought. And at first I was like, great video, Brad. I went over, made a little comment. I gave a quick guess of what I thought my first couple of CDs were and threw the comment up and said, oh, that'll be the end of it. But other people have been doing this thread, been following Brad's lead, and I've really enjoyed these videos. I saw a Larry Graves one, I saw one by Alan C. Records, I saw one by BMX Seeker, Joe Mean Mr. Mayo, Fit to be Tie-Dyed Paul. Gee, am I missing anybody? I'm sorry, but I mean, I've seen tons of these first CD videos. It seems to have sparked something in people wanting to talk about the era of CDs, the onset of CDs, and so I thought, gee, I might as well jump in and throw my little couple of stories in about compact discs. So I've got everything all set up here. I've got some props to show you, so I figure let's do it. Let's talk about some CDs for a little while. CDs, well, I could say they're the greatest thing that ever happened to me, or they could be the bane of my existence. Depends how you look at it, and depends who you talk to in my life or in my family or circle of friends. When CDs came in, they were just, as you all know, so convenient, so easy to handle, so easy to store them. This was all the stuff we were looking at when they first came out. They had that perfect crystal clear sound, or supposedly, this is what we were hearing back in the mid-80s or so, and that they would never scratch. Remember the early stories with CDs that you could take a CD out and throw it across the pavement, go pick it up, put it in your CD player, and it sounds just as perfect as the day you took it out of the wrapper. Well, I think some of those thoughts have been debunked, so to speak. I mean, especially one about CDs being so damage-proof that you could throw it across the ground, get a couple of scratches on it, it would still sound great. That's pretty much done. I have CDs that have sometimes one little gouge in them, or if you drop it, it gets one little spot, and that spot will skip forever right in the same part of the song, just like a record. And then again, I do have some CDs where they have surface markings and rubs and scratches on them, and they play just fine in certain players. So go figure. Again, I'm no expert on CDs, but in some cases, the littlest thing can happen to them and they skip forever. You can never fix it. And in some cases, they can look beat up and tattered and play just as well as the day you got them. So what do I know? Go figure. You can program them. Remember when we got CD players? I had a Pioneer player. You could program it. You could set the order of the songs. You could skip songs. And if you had a remote control with your player, which most of us did, I had an old Pioneer, you could just be sitting 20 feet across the room, and if you wanted to hear the same song over and over and over again, you could do that. You could just keep going back to it with a click of your thumb. Or if you wanted to jump to the next song, but then go back to another one, the convenience was just so wonderful. All these things about it made us just all, I think, fall in love with CDs, or the idea of CDs. And we were told they would last forever. And in some cases, I think they just may last forever, because I have some that I got in my first CDs, which I'll talk about, were around 1986. The late part of 1986 is when I got mine. And they're still around today, and they still play well, and I enjoy them. So it's a great medium. And let's face it, for us vinyl collectors that were born in the, back in the old days, it was a little bit of a difficult move, because we had amassed such a great vinyl collection, and in my case, I had a very extensive vinyl collection at the time, by the mid-80s, and it was hard to kind of let that go and fall by the wayside for a little bit, but I did. I did forget about vinyl for a long time, I must admit, and I'll tell you a couple of stories about that and why I never got rid of my vinyl collection, thankfully, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But I have to say, I did jump in head first with the CDs because of all the points I brought up earlier. They just seemed so wonderful, I jumped in head first. The only thing is, I will say that my wife used to joke with me. We had only been married like a little over a year or so, a year or two back when CDs came in for me in around 1986. She used to joke with me like, oh my goodness, you're not going to replace all your albums with CDs, are you? I remember saying that to me over and over again. I remember assuring her or reassuring her, saying, "Oh no, no, no," because at the time CDs seemed kind of expensive, a little pricier than albums, I believe. And I said, "Oh no, 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 I'd never do that." I says, "I'm just going to stick to the greatest hits. My CD collection is just going to be greatest hits and best ofs only. I'm not going to replace every album." Yeah, okay, right. Like that happened, okay? But I have to admit, I was innocent at the time, and I sincerely meant when I told her that back in 1986. I really did mean it. But of course, as you know, as time goes on, and the convenience and the sound of CDs, like we've talked about, I did end up replacing, or not replacing because I never got rid of my vinyl, but I ended up replicating my collection in CDs for the most part. I mean, not everything, but I did do that. So I apologize for that to Mrs. Street. 30 plus years later of collecting CDs, and it's come full circle. And anyway, you know the story with that. Anyway, that running joke about just getting the greatest hits, she jokes with me to this day about it, and will say to me, "Oh, remember when you said you were just going to get the greatest hits?" And then she looks at my, rack of CDs, wall full of CDs, and she kind of laughs about it. But anyway, I never did get rid of my vinyl. I'm happy I did not. You might be saying, "Matt, how did you do that?" So many people, what is the term, cull the collection, or weed out the collection, so to speak, or get rid of the collection completely of their vinyl. Many people did that. Many of them have no regrets, but many do have regrets about getting rid of their vinyl. I never did. The reason I didn't is because of timing and a little bit of luck that I didn't get rid of my vinyl. Here's what happened. When me and my wife first got married, we lived in a little apartment on the second floor, not too far from where my parents, the home I grew up in, is. And so, because the apartment was so small when we first got married, we had no children at the time, I couldn't really take my collection with me of vinyl, because this is 1985, by the way. I got married in 1985, and I hadn't gotten a CD player yet. The CDs were just coming in, people were talking about them. But my vinyl collection was so extensive, and it was in these tall, and someday I'll do a room tour and show you, and I still have the racks. They're in these tall racks I had to put together, and they're almost 6 feet tall. And the weight of the vinyl, storing these things in our little apartment, I just could not do it. I couldn't do it. So I left them at my parents' house, in where I made a little room down in my parents' basement, and I had a little area where I kept all my stuff, and the vinyl was over in the corner, wasn't bothering anybody, wasn't in anybody's way. I just left it there at my parents' house, out of sight, out of mind, and didn't think about it. Now, every once in a while, I was listening. You might be saying, "Well, Matt, what were you doing for music?" I was into a lot of cassettes back then, as we all were. I'm talking in that early 80s, mid 80s period. I was a cassette guy. I had a lot of cassettes. Had the car cassette player back then. We had car cassette players, for you younger people. And I used to listen to cassettes nonstop. So I didn't really care about leaving the vinyl at my parents'. I just kind of left it there and said, I'll get to it someday, or deal with it someday. Well, 10 years went by. CDs came in. I started collecting CDs. Still had my cassettes. Didn't care about my vinyl at that point. Like I said, living in the apartment with my wife, didn't have them. And then we moved to our first home. It was a little starter home, a little crappy, when you're young, starting out. But we were so happy to have our own little place. But it was one of those money pits, if you want to call it, handyman special, fixer-up special. And it was a small little cape. But it really wasn't a giant place. And I really didn't have a place there where I could have brought all my albums over. And I don't think I had a really great record player at that time. So I left them at my parents. And as I said, many years went by before I finally got a decent record player that had a cassette player to it, and got my first CD player in 1986, which was a Pioneer, as I mentioned. So anyway, it was a series of things and happening and making moves that by the time I finally, in the early to mid 90s, got into a little bigger house, a little better house with my wife, and had more storage area, that's when I finally brought the albums with me. So 10 years went by before I really had this need to have my vinyl. And therefore, because all those years went by and now we were into the 90s, by then I just said, well, I have them all this time, might as well just hang on to them. So I had no thoughts or idea of culling the collection or weeding it out or getting rid of it. I just said, I might as well keep it. And by then I had the new record player, and that came with the cassette and the big system, and had the Pioneer CD player. So I said, why get rid of them? Maybe once in a while I'll throw a record on. So I didn't. I hung on to them. Anyway, the first LP, and I don't have it, last LP I should say, the last LP I ever really bought in 1986 was, and I still have it, I should have grabbed it and I didn't. You know what, maybe I'll grab it right now. Hang on one second. Okay, I've got it, folks, I've got it. Here it is. Sorry, you know, the lack of preparation, I can't, not planning. This was the last piece of vinyl I ever bought during the first run of vinyl. Okay, Boston's Third Stage, released in 1986. I remember buying this, and I remember it being my last piece of vinyl for many, many years, maybe a decade, as I said. Okay, it's a great album. I love Boston. Just dropped a piece of paper, I'll get that later. It's a great album. I love the band Boston, seen them live several times in the later years, and this was the last piece I bought of vinyl. Then jumped headfirst into those CDs. So that's the bridge, so to speak, the bridge to the new era. Anyway, I tried to think of what were my first CDs. What did I buy first? I thought, and I was saying on some people's posts, that it might have been the Pretenders, this one right here, the Pretenders, the singles. I said this had to be it, because from the time I can remember having the CD player in the late '86 area, I thought I remember having the Pretenders. But I wanted to be accurate for this video, so I looked it up a little bit, and this didn't come out till 1987, which doesn't make sense to me, because I really thought I had this right from day one with CDs. The first group of Beatles CDs I got are obviously these. Here they are. Okay, when the first 4 in mono came out in February of 1987, and I bought these right away, and I thought for sure I had this Pretenders one before these, so earlier than February of '87, but apparently I didn't, because this didn't come out till sometime in mid-1987. So I really went through all my collection, folks, and I think I've dug up a couple that are my official first, or among the first CDs I ever bought. But we all know these and love these. Great thing when they came out. So happy to get them. I remember there being a lot of complaints about them when they first came out, that the packaging was very plain. People were disappointed that they couldn't get both stereo and the mono mix on one CD, because CDs hold so much space, so much more than albums do, vinyl does. But that's my first group of Beatles CDs. And before I go any further, I'm going to say, hey, let's take a trip down memory lane a little bit. And who remembers mini CDs? Do you remember these little guys? Here's one that I still have. It's a Raspberries, kind of like a best of CD. I thought you'd get a kick out of seeing these little guys. Little like 3-inch disc. And this one's the Raspberries, and you get 4 songs on it. This was put out by Rhino, I don't know what year. And without some serious glasses here, I'm probably not going to see it, but I think it says 1988, from what I can see. So remember these little guys? And who remembers long boxes? Here's a couple of CD singles I got in 1988. I don't have a lot of these, but here's a couple of the Beatle ones I did get. Here's the long box. You got 2 songs on it, like this one, A Hard Day's Night with Things We Said Today, on Capitol. Got the barcode. Remember these cardboard long boxes? I had all the Beatle ones somewhere, and I don't know what happened to them. I must have got rid of them at some point. I was saving them, but at some point I think I just said the heck with it, and I got rid of them. So if I can get this out here, I'll show it. There you go. Okay. And then inside the long box, you get the little mini CD single. I only have 2 of these. I'll show them both to you. Okay. And here's the disc. Okay. So they're kind of unique. I mean, you don't see too many of these little CD singles, little teeny 3-inch CDs anymore. And the last one I got was Can't Buy Me Love, backed with You Can't Do That. For whatever reason, I saved these 2 cardboard long boxes with the CD singles, but unfortunately, as I said, I did not save the long boxes with the original Beatle releases, which I kind of regret. I probably should have hung on to them. Here's the single. All right, pretty unique little thing. I won't take it all out, but you get the idea. There it is. Okay. And as I said, who remembers long boxes? And here you go. Here's one that I still have. This is a long box CD version of Paul McCartney's Unplugged, which came out in 1991. Still in the shrink wrap. Never took it out of the shrink, but I thought you'd get a kick of seeing the long boxes. You remember these guys? And it would be a buggy. You'd have to take all this cellophane off them, unwrap them, and you got to get the CD out of the box. You'd be ripping things apart. But these were neat. I think because when, as we all know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know already. When vinyl first came out, when CDs first came out, and a lot of stores were converting to CDs. Well, a lot of their racks were built for this, for 12-inch vinyl. So when the CDs came out, they put them in these long boxes, figuring you could get like you could get 2 rows of long boxes, CD long boxes, in the old racks where the vinyl used to be in the record store, and it was convenient for the shop owners. So that's why I think originally CDs came in these long boxes, so the convenience of displaying them in the store on the racks where the records used to be. Of course, we know over time and a few years later, long boxes went the way of the dinosaur, and they are now extinct. You don't see them anymore. But anyway, I thought you'd get a kick out of this one because it is Beatles related, and it is still in the shrink, never opened. Okay, so now, do I like CDs still? Yes, I do. I do still purchase CDs. I still own them and buy them. And it's kind of come full circle because we went from vinyl to cassettes and 8-track there for a little while in the 70s and 80s. But let's keep them aside for now. We went to vinyl, then we got heavily into the CDs during the late 80s into the 90s. And then, of course, in the 2000s, vinyl, and 2010s for sure. Vinyl has come back very strong. We all seem to go back to vinyl for a little while. And now it's kind of come full circle for me, whereas I'm not buying as much vinyl as I used to. As I told you in one of my previous videos, I've kind of slowed down on the vinyl stuff, and I'm getting more back into the CDs and the convenience of having them and keeping them in the car. I still like that convenience of a CD. Now, my kids think I'm a dinosaur and laugh at me because they'll go by my car, my vehicle I drive all the time when they're around the house. They're all adults now, the 2 of them, but they'll look in my car and see CDs strewn all over the seat, and they go, "Dad, what are you doing?" There's things called Spotify now, and there's things you can program into your phone and have thousands of songs right in your telephone, and you just do Bluetooth into your car, and you can listen to 1,000,000 songs in your car. You can listen to the whole Beatles catalog in your car with the new devices. And I go, yeah, okay, whatever. I do a little of that, folks. I am up to some technology and have a couple of things downloaded in my phone that I can listen to in the car. They finally showed me how to use the Bluetooth and all that stuff. So yeah, I do some of that stuff. I am coming up into the current times a little bit. But to me, there's nothing like, grabbing that CD and just throwing it on in the car and then having that hard piece of physical media to listen to. So I still do enjoy that. Although CDs aren't as prominent with me anymore, they're still there. They're still part of my life. And I wish I could have some glamorous CDs to show you as my first 2 CDs, but these were among the first in the first batch that I ever had. And one of them is Air Supply's Greatest Hits, which they were a big fave of my wife. and we saw them live. My wife liked this band back in the day. We got married. So I got Air Supply's Greatest Hits on Arista. And this other little compilation one, which I have on now, is called Brits Blitz, the very best of British rock. It was on Polytel. This came in a 2-disc set. I still have the second disc, but I'm just bringing out one to show you. But this is among the first batch of CDs I ever got. Air Supply and British Invasion Blitz. So that's the best I can do, folks. And again, a few months later came the Pretenders, the Beatles, and the rest is history. Okay, that's it. 20 minutes. You're probably all bored, and half of you were probably left already. But anyway, I wanted to jump in the fray. Take care. God bless. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.